Grapple Arts Radio.
Hey everybody, Stephan Kesting from GrappleArts.com here. Today I'm talking to Tony Blauer. And Tony Blauer is actually an ex-Montrealer, kind of like me, and I met him, I think, 25 years ago. We talked about this when he had his school on just off of DeCary Boulevard, and I was starting at McGill. And in that time, or since that time, he's been super busy. He's moved to the States. He started Blauer Tactical Systems. It's a huge, it's a very well-known firm in the combatives area. So self-defense, combatives, teaching law enforcement personnel, teaching various Army units, Coast Guard, Air Force, Navy. He's developed a line of protective gear and a system of training that goes with it that's now fairly well known. It started out as Panic Attack. And I'm super glad to have him on the podcast today because he's going to have a very interesting take on the role of ground fighting and grappling in a self-defense context. And he's also really well known for his combat psychology and understanding and teaching of the psychology of combat. So, hey, Tony, welcome to the show.
Hey, man, how are you?
Oh, very good. So you're just about to head off to LA, I hear.
Yeah, the CrossFit Games is this weekend, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners are aware of, if not into CrossFit. And one of my closest friends is the founder of CrossFit, and so I'm kind of adopted family and very honored and flattered. And it's just it's a big part of our annual happenings. And the thing kicks off tomorrow, so I'm heading up to the Carson area as soon as we get off this interview.
Okay, so you find that the CrossFit approach and the CrossFit paradigm dovetails well with the other stuff that you teach, with the more combatives aspect, or is it a separate love?
It's both. You know, my whole family CrossFits. One of my daughters is more into surfing, but she'll play around with the CrossFit. But the rest of the family does, and it's a lifestyle. It's that life. The touchy-feely term like life management and all that stuff. I mean, it's when you get into CrossFit properly, what you end up thinking about is your diet, how much you sleep, how often you work out, how you scale your workouts, what you're trying to accomplish. So it teaches you about goal setting. And anyone who's ever done a CrossFit workout, and this is the biggest thing when I lecture about this, and we run seminars all over the world, and I talk about all the different modalities out there. And there's a few well-known internet generated tactical fitness type programs, and there's a number of them that have approached me to try and get me involved, to endorse their thing, and I've looked at it, and some of them are very interesting, but they're esoteric or they're complex and fine motor skill driven, and they require a lot of finesse and a lot of mobility just to do the workout. And the thing about CrossFit, and I think this is important for fighters, is most CrossFit workouts are short and explosive, just like a real street fight. I mean, even a UFC championship fight, it's like having multiple street fights in 5 periods. The clashes are explosive, and then they're stalking, and so you need a training modality that replicates some of the anaerobic taxing, and certainly, and this is my favorite component, is the psychological system, like training methods that allow you to casually do a workout and pace yourself during a workout. Don't develop fear management and the intensity and that mindset of I need to do one more rep now. Just like, someone saying you got to get off the stool now, or you need to flurry now, or you need to take this guy down now. And so a lot of times when you're in a CrossFit workout, anyone who's ever done one knows there's lots of moments when you just want to quit, just like a fight. And so I haven't found anything that kind of mirrors some of that psychology and some of the physical stresses and output that CrossFit does. So sorry to ramble so much. I don't.
No.
I just love it. I really love it. And I do want to segue one thing. I just got an email from Europe about somebody who's tracking this whole thing, and he said, when he does a really intense CrossFit workout, he doesn't have the energy to properly do any of his martial arts. And so I want to throw that out to your listeners because, of course, your audience is the grappling martial arts side of things. If your main sport or activity is Jiu-Jitsu or MMA or kickboxing, whatever it is, you've got to break that up into your skill set development and your focus on your craft, and you use conditioning to augment the goals you want to reach or achieve as a martial artist or a combatives expert. So if you switch that priority around and you start going, man, I love CrossFit, and you crush yourself in a CrossFit workout, then of course your skill set and your sport is going to suffer. You got to find a balance.
So in a practical day-to-day thing, what would that mean? Would that mean perhaps doing CrossFit after you've trained your other martial art, your Jiu-Jitsu, for the sake of argument?
It would depend, again, on how you're cycling through your workout and what's coming up. So I would tell you, like, if you had a competition coming up, in 2 months, that you start to scale and cycle down on the CrossFit workouts and spend most of your time, working on your mindset, your timing, and your skill development. That's supposing your physical requirements are where they need to be to compete. So, right. As an example, I deal mostly with law enforcement and military groups, and then on a smaller scale, privately, MMA and pro fighters, kind of behind the scenes. And it's not really a big part of our business, and we just do it because we love the athletes. But what we'll tell a guy, for example, is, the Son and Silva fight. If Silva didn't have the conditioning that he had, he'd never be able to slap on that. Was it a triangle choke that he finished?
Yeah, it was a triangle choke.
Yeah, but I mean that was after being thrown around for quite a while. So he had the resiliency, the ability to slip and bob and weave and zig and zag and take the takedowns and whatever was being thrown at him. But then had the ability to neuromuscularly, when the opportunity presented itself, neuromuscular meaning brain saying, do this body now. There's a lot of times when you get real tired, just, in the ring, and you got to kick a guy or punch a guy, but your legs are 50 pounds each because your conditioning didn't support the fight you were in. So the real answer is this: is you got to do both. Like when I train guys, I'll tell them, okay, we're going to do some lactic threshold exercises now, and then we're going to do technique. And they're like, what? I go, yeah. So imagine this. You're being chased by bad guys. You hop a fence, you run some stairs, you kick down a door, and now you got to get into a fight with some guys that are fresh because you just got ambushed. In other words, there are times that you show up at the fight and you're exhausted, and then there's times you're fresh. So you can't predict that. And it's a very interesting dynamic way to train because it's again more about the mental side of things. And you remember Lombardi's legendary quote that fatigue makes cowards of us all. So I do both personally. I'll do some hard training and then I'll do some technique training. I mentally position myself before the training and say, this is what you're working on right now. So if you try to have the same results every time you do a workout, but you're changing your rhythm and you're changing your protocols, of course, it's going to be very frustrating. So theory determines experience. Does that make sense?
I think so.
A bunch of people emailing you after going, what did he say? What did he say?
If you want to get super pedantic about it, really, if self-defense is taking care of your body and martial arts is taking care of your body, then it's kind of ridiculous. Let's just pretend that we can have somebody who smokes, eats Kentucky Fried Chicken, and is 100 pounds overweight, and they're some kind of deadly killer because they have mastered Dim Mak, and they can actually use the 5-point palm exploding heart technique and kill you. Let's just take that as a given. They're putting their own body they are their own worst enemy. No man can defeat them, but they're running the risk of such boring ailments like heart attack, stroke, and osteoporosis, right, breaking a hip. So really, you can look at a fitness component as one of the bedrock elements of self-defense, if for no other reason than you're taking care of your body, which is presumably what martial arts and self-defense is all about.
Exactly, and that's a valid point. You know, you look at the bottom line is a more flexible, a stronger, faster athlete has a better chance in any type of athletic challenge, whether it's running for a bus because you're going to miss an important interview or your wedding or something, or you know, running to get away from bad guys, or running to stop bad guys because they've grabbed your kid or your wife or your husband or whatever. So, you know, I always tell people, you know, you remember back in the day, long before the UFC, we had, and there's some people that probably still believe this, the urban martial myth that size doesn't matter. Remember that one? Size doesn't matter. Well, I used to say that, well, you know, size absolutely matters. That's why they've got weight classes. That's why every 5 pounds in boxing, you're fighting a different guy, because they figured out a long time ago by physics that, you know, it makes a big difference. You got 5 pounds more on somebody, you're hitting them a lot harder. And the way I tell people who disagree with this, I said, let's say you're the best driver in the world, and this guy over here is the best driver in the world. And I put you in a smart car, and I put him in a Hummer.
Easy. I drive a smart car.
There you go. So I got bad news for you. If you guys have a collision with a guy in a Hummer, the fact that you're a good driver and he's a good driver doesn't matter at the point of impact.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's really just the metaphor that you know, if the car as a metaphor is what you can do with your body, then making it more agile, making it stronger, making it faster is going to help you. You still need, as again, it's just the metaphor, Steve. You know, we still need the psychological, strategic side of things, of course, and that's your game plan and your confidence and knowing what you can do. But there's
Sorry, go ahead.
This metaphor that, you know, if I got to take a trip, I need a car, I need gas, and I need a map. I got to know where to go. And the map represents my strategy, my decision-making. The gas is my fighting spirit, you know, as a metaphor, and the car represents my physical abilities. And if you've got, you know, the car and the mindset, but you have absolutely no game plan, you're probably going to lose against somebody who's got a good game plan. And I think everyone gets the metaphor. But what were you going to say, bro?
I was just going to use that as a good segue into something that you are really well known for, which is the whole area of combat psychology. And I thought maybe we could deal a little bit with tips and tactics on dealing with fear, whether that's fear either in a context of self-defense or confrontation, or even fear you're going to your very first Jiu-Jitsu tournament and you think you're okay, but your bladder is telling you differently, and you've got to, you know, go to the washroom 5 times before your match, and then you forget to breathe and you gas out. Really, all that's coming from fear and anxiety. So I was wondering if we could move into this a little bit, and you could give us your perspective from more of an urban combative's point of view, or a combat psychology point of view.
Sure, not a problem. You know, growing up in Montreal, you're either a skier or a hockey player. And I grew up as a skier. And I was on skis, skiing by the time I was 1.5. I was already, you know, kind of on my own, you know, skiing the baby slopes. By the time I was 13, I was considered one of the best skiers in the country. And some of our coaches, you know, for the racing team that I was on, you know, behind my back would talk about, hey, is Tony going to go to the Olympics and what happening? And both my parents were on the Canadian Ski Patrol. And I remember one big race we had. It was a zone race up at Mont Tremblant. And I'd already almost thrown up in my mouth a couple times, already pissed like 5 times, shitting my pants, dude. So I always skied great in practice, but every time there was a race, I never won it. And everyone's like, wow, man, I thought you were going to win that, you know. And you know that times, like, if you beat somebody by tenths of a second in a race, you know, like that's how ski races, you know, are won and lost in thousandths of a second and tenths of a second, hundredths of a second. And so here I am. My coach comes up to me. This is like 1973. My coach comes up to me. He's rubbing my knees because at the top of the hill is like a pseudo blizzard going. He's rubbing my knees. I want to throw up. I'm nervous as shit. He looks at me and he says, "This is 1973, dude." He says, "How you feeling, kid?" And I looked over at him. I said, "Great, coach." And I went down and proceeded to like fall 3 gates before the finish line, and they timed me all the way down. And the guy came up to me after, he said, "Man, you were like almost 2 seconds ahead of the guy that eventually won the race at the time." So you imagine how hard I was going, but I never won, and so I always got in the way of myself, which is to me the whole combat psychology thing. we ask people in our class, and the point of this story is that what we've come up with and what we share to military, SWAT, law enforcement, fighters, isn't pie in the sky, isn't esoteric visualization. I was there in my own sport, and the stuff is generic. It's how you talk to yourself. It's how you self-coach. At the end of the day, your coaches aren't in there with you. And very often you have what's called auditory exclusion. You can't hear your corner. You can't hear people yelling at you. And just you go into that little bubble when the fight starts. And so at that point, you really need to be on your own. And in fact, who was I talking to? I think it was Sugar Ray Leonard back in the day when he fought in Montreal. I got to hang out with him and spend some time. And part of how I put together my program was talking to some of the best fighters in the world, whether they were terrorist hunters or guys like Sugar Ray who did stuff in the ring that Bruce Lee only wrote about. It was just amazing. And I asked him a question directly. I said, do you remember when Angelo Dundee and him had that falling apart because Dundee wanted more money, and so they severed the contract? He was probably getting 15%, and when Sugar Ray started making like ridiculous money, he wanted to renegotiate the contract, and he didn't want to. And it was like, dude, you're getting 15% when I was making $1 million, but now I'm making $50 million. I don't want to give you 15%. I'm the one at risk. And so they had a fight and went their own way. But I remember talking to Sugar Ray during that period, and I said to him, when you come back in the corner, how much does Angelo say to you that guides you through the fight? And he said, if Angelo still needs to tell me what to do at this point in my career, then he should be in the ring and I should be on the other side of the road. And I thought that was an interesting thing. Your coach is there to inspire you. They shouldn't be telling you things to do. And so I think a lot of this, and now let's turn this into mental preparation. There's so many things you can do, but you need to know what you can do, not what your coach wants you to do, what you can do. And sometimes, a big hit or a surprise tactic can surprise you, and you come back in between rounds, or your coach yells something about position or reminds you that you belong there. I've seen some of the worst coaching and some of the best coaching over the years, and the moral of this is in understanding the term or the word coach. I've seen a lot of people that are like gym teachers in your corner. And what they're doing is they're giving you too much information, and they're like going, okay, in this next move, put your hand here and do this, like they're instructing you and there's going to be a test. Our definition for coach is one who inspires performance. But where you got to take this is you got to be your own coach. You got to know what you can do. You got to know how to talk to yourself. And you brought up some stuff about, the anxiety, the bathroom, the self-doubt. And there's almost no way around going through that. What you're going to feel at your first competition or your first street fight, your fifth competition, your 10th competition, it changes, and everybody goes through that. The difference is this, as an example, say you start having auditory exclusion. All you hear is your heart pounding and you're breathing hard. That freaks people out if they don't know what that is. If the first time they're experiencing that is during a competition, that freaks people out. So I've had police officers say to me in our officer survival courses, so, suddenly I was in this gutter fight with this guy, and he was trying to grab my gun, and all I could hear was my heart and my breathing and him breathing. And he looks at me like, what is that? And tell me something important. That was his body language. And I looked at him and I said, dude, that is your brain shutting out every irrelevant distraction so that you can focus on what you need to focus on. It's called auditory exclusion. It's like, okay, that's the first light bulb. I said, and the second thing is this. If you're in a serious fight and suddenly you can't hear yourself breathing or your heart pounding, that's really, really bad. And I pause and look. He starts laughing. That's what I try to do with guys is get them to laugh at this. At the end of the day, it is what it is. But what he hadn't had was like an education in advance of his experience, and that made it worse. It compounded it. So if you walk out and you go, my legs are supposed to feel heavy, although I don't like it. I'm supposed to feel the shallow breathing, even though I don't like that. I'm nervous. I can't really think straight and clear. I don't like that, and this will change with time as I get more experience. Right now, just focus on what you got to focus on, and that's, what was my game plan for the fight. I've told guys who wanted to compete, because our stuff was always very street, so but every so often I'd have a student that said, I want to kickbox, I want to go into an MMA fight, I want to do this. And I would grill them as to why. And it was when I discovered why that I could coach them in their process. And so some of the guys, I would say, remember, your goal here is just to do this and get it out of your system. That's what you told me. So in the changing room, you're not trying to win this. You're not trying to lose this. You want to know if you have the balls, the will, the tenacity to step out into this ring, cage, mat, and just do this, And it took all the pressure off. It wasn't like, I got to perform and win this because my girlfriend's watching.
Well, I think there's a good case to be made, and I'm hoping you agree with me, but it'd be interesting if you don't, that given that most adults in our society don't get in very many, probably their last street fight was in high school. But, it's a possibility. It's not something that happens to most of us every single day, that there's a good argument to be made for putting yourself under stress, say in the context of a competition. Yes, we all recognize that in the street there isn't a ref to keep you safe. There's not time limits. There's weapons. There's no necessarily uniforms. There's no weight divisions. But there is stress. And at least by exposing yourself to that voluntarily in the relatively safe context of a competition, you can begin to acclimatize to that, begin to get used to the adrenaline dump. And I noticed for myself, for example, I was always a very nervous competitor. But there was a year that I was doing two things. I was competing a lot in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and submission grappling, and I was also doing a lot of competing in the Firefighter Combat Challenge, which is basically a 1.5 to 2 minute all-out anaerobic sprint, and you just feel like throwing up at the end of it. And it's being filmed for TV, and there's crowds there, and there's people cheering. And at the end of that year, I was far, far more comfortable with the performance aspect of it, and the stress and anxiety. I guess it was still there, but the effects of it were greatly minimized. And I think to some extent I was less nervous, but to another extent I was just much more comfortable surfing that adrenaline and fight or flight hormone wave, the wave of those hormones going through the body. So if somebody's interested in self-defense, should they compete? There, I'll throw that out there as a question for that reason.
Yeah, I was hoping to disagree with you just because you thought that would be interesting, but there is a correlate, and the only way to get good at anything is to do a repetition, right? So one rep is X amount of experience, 2 reps is twice that, and so on and so forth. What I've discovered about the feelings of fear is that the doubt, the hesitation, the anxiety that it produces it's almost like if I say to you, I'll give you a great, when I moved to California, here I am, 50 years old, been driving for, since I'm, 16 back in Montreal, I got your learner's permit, driving however long that is, I'm horrible at math. And I get here and I go to switch everything over and I go to get my California's permit and I step in there and I was misinformed on the website, my consultant, and I find out right there that I can't just automatically, even though I've got a great record, get my driver's license because it's California. They do things different. I've got to take a test. And
a test.
Yeah. Well, that's all it was. It was just a test, a multiple choice test. And I look over and there's you've been to the DMV, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not like everyone sitting there had looked like Einstein. You had every demographic possible, from the guy in the suit to the guy who, was you're going, there's no way that guy needs a driver's license, right? And they're all writing tests, and it was like you can fail it, and then you can rewrite it and come back multiple times, and it was set up so that you could get a driver's license if you passed. But what I did is I got an adrenaline dump. I got nervous. I was like, shit, what if I fail? And I'm like, I haven't even read and what was funny was my wife, who's uber confident about so many things. I walk up to her and I go, we got to write a test. She goes, so big deal. The driver, what kind of questions can they ask you? You've been driving for, 30-odd years. And I'm all nervous. She goes in, she finishes the thing in like 14 minutes, hands it in. She's got a smile on her face. She's looking at me like as I'm like thinking about things, and I'm like mouthing to her, going like, "Holy shit, I don't know." Like I'm really like, "What is this?" And she's like rolling her eyes at me. So sure enough, she fails, I pass. It was very funny. She rewrote it again right away and passed. But it was a stupid example for everyone out there that it was a surprise. So in our SPEAR system, we talk about our simple law of what creates startle flinch. Startle is the brain going what, and flinch is your body manifesting that. So whether you get a micro contraction or your hands go to push away danger, depending on the type of threat. The startle flinch is any stimulus that gets introduced too quickly. A butterfly can make you flinch, and so can a bumblebee. A driver's license, a sudden driving test can make you flinch, and so can somebody say, hey, you're in the wrong weight division here. You got to fight here, and somebody just changes what you thought was going to have happen, and it'll throw you for a loop. So the brain is a funny thing that way, and that's why the self-coaching skills are immense. You got to know the rules, and there's a couple of rules we talk about, and they're simple acronyms we love to use on fear. So everyone should know what an acronym by now. But so fear is an acronym, FEAR. One is false evidence appearing real, and the other is false expectations appearing real. So the acronym FEAR, false evidence, is when you see something that triggers a response in your brain that then triggers an emotional response. So 15 years ago, if you saw guys with cauliflower ears, what would you think 15 years ago?
Before rugby or judo?
What? Say again? Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Rugby or judo?
Yeah, but now you say that coming from a grappling background. I remember back in the day, I didn't know what cauliflower ears were. They were so infrequent. I'm from a different generation. I'd be like, what's with that guy's ears? Holy shit, Now if you see somebody with cauliflower ears, people immediately go, oh, he must be an MMA fighter. In other words, our whole modern society is now acclimated to cauliflower ears because of the UFC and MMA. It's little things like that. So the evidence of something, you see somebody with big knuckles and you think that he can punch really hard. You see somebody, with big biceps or big pecs and a tattoo, and he's got, you can tell his nose has been busted a couple of times. He's got a cauliflower ear. He's got a couple of scars on his face. And now you're in the street and you bump into the guy and he goes, hey, watch it, man. And he steps towards you. Most people who don't do so, your original question is, can competition help you in the street? Here's how it can in two ways. One is the more you get used to relaxing under pressure, seizing opportunity. This is great stuff that BJJ can teach you. How to stay cool and work for position. How to manage fear because you're constantly rolling with different skills, abilities, sizes. It teaches you to rely on yourself, on your brain, and to think about position. And so now here you are back in the street with this guy. Well, years ago, you would look at the guy with the scars on his face and the busted nose and you'd go, holy shit, you would see false evidence appearing real. This guy must be a badass street fighter. He's the predator. I must be the prey. I'm going to get my ass kicked. Modern day psychology and what we tell our students is you got to ask yourself, if this guy was such a badass, then how come his nose has been broken? Where did he get the scars? Why does his face look like that? And maybe he's a bully. Somebody else punched him in the face. Why can't you? So, the first thing you got to learn to do is give yourself permission to win. A lot of people, their self-talk. Remember what I said to my skiing coach? I said, hey, great coach, but I really wanted to say, coach, how come I keep falling? How come I don't win any races? That's what I wanted to say, but I was too afraid to say it. So the first thing we tell people is you got to give yourself permission to be there. You got to give yourself permission to win. The next thing is you can't look at because your brain is going to look for little reasons to lose. Oh, the sun was in my eyes. I wasn't ready. I didn't have a good night's sleep. And that's just performance anxiety. So you're looking for excuses. You start with giving yourself permission to be there. You earn the right to be there, whether it's self-defense or in a match. And then when you see something in somebody, you've got to remember that that's false evidence. That what you've done is you've actually imbued your opponent with a skill they haven't yet proven. Oh, he's got 2 cauliflower ears, I have none, he must be a better grappler. Not necessarily so. Simple stuff like that. And the last one is false expectation. So what happens is we see something, it triggers a visual in our mind, that creates an expectation. If it's something that kind of disempowers us, it's a negative expectation. We created this whole, we call it the neural circuitry of fear. It's understanding how to make decisions under duress. And we teach it at every one of our courses. It's kind of a cool thing.
Okay. So I'm to totally change gears here and maybe drag it back into an area that our listeners will be a bit more familiar with. I've heard that from reliable sources, Facebook, so I read it on the internet, it must be true, that at the young age of 51 that you yourself have started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Is this true?
It actually is. It actually is. And damn, I thought my secret was a secret, but alas.
How did you manage to hold out for so long?
Well, it's funny. I got into music when I was a teenager, but I never wanted to study other people's music because I really wanted to write my own songs, so I didn't want to study like a style of music. And was in a few bands for a while and wrote a bunch of songs, and that career didn't take off, obviously, but it was a ton of fun. It was my instinct was I didn't want to follow that path and get good at a guy who sounded like Led Zeppelin or Aerosmith or AC/DC. Those are the bands from back in our day. And because I was so busy with all of the tactical teaching we were doing with military and law enforcement and stuff like that, I didn't want to have a sport methodology at all get in the way of what we were researching and doing. And it had happened a couple of times, once at Naval Special Warfare years ago, actually 1993. It was around the same time as the UFC had just come out, where we were experimenting with a lot of the grappling stuff, and it ended up in a multiple assailant scenario, just coming out of the blue because everything looked right, and all of the positions were in place, and in a gun disarm that turned into there was a gun disarm that I was doing with one of the operators, and he moved away from the pressure I'd applied to his hand and dropped to a knee and kind of went to grab my leg to secure his position and lower his hand away from the leverage that the trigger guard was putting on there. And what I did is I slammed him I pulled him down onto his back and stepped right into an arm bar and disarmed him. And it was beautiful. It was a seamless integration of street fight and jiu-jitsu, and it was gorgeous had it had been one-on-one with a secure perimeter. Meaning, we were doing this multiple assailant drill, and I just put myself on my back just because there was a move there, and it really bothered me that night in my hotel room. The guys thought it was pretty impressive, but I went, that had that been a real fight, maybe I don't know if you saw that street fight that's going around the internet right now, where some mother kicks and knocks out a guy that has mounted and he's grounding and pounding some guy in a street.
No, I haven't seen it yet.
I'll email it to you right after. Maybe you can include it on the in the interview. On the interview, I mean, it's fantastic. But these guys are rolling around, and everyone's going, yeah, MMA, and you can actually see that they've done some low level of training. And then she just realizes her son's getting his ass kicked, and she steps over and just soccer kicks the guy in the face and knocks him out cold, more cold than you've seen in like in a UFC fight. It's amazing. So the tagline should be "Know Your Arena," so we tell people like there's certain things that when you're thinking about submission and position, you want to remember the context. And so that happened to me right at the beginning of the UFC, making its foray into our minds and hearts. And I realized that my business was trying to help enhance the survivability of police officers and soldiers and other people in professional security business. And I encourage them to always do stuff, but my personal path said, I can't do that. It's too much fun, but it's going to find its way to slip into our POI, or program of instruction, and that's just not right. Well, jump ahead now, 20 odd years, later, I've got a team, an MTT, a mobile training team. We've got guys teaching all over the world. I got a course going on right now while I'm talking to you, and some months we've got 8 or 9 courses, and I've got very experienced people that have trained with me for years teaching, and I just wanted to do something for myself, so I'm 51, and I just wanted to do something for myself. I've always had in the back of my mind, obviously, despite what maybe some people think, just because of media and magazines and stuff like that, or blogs, I've always had a fascination and respect for all things martial. And lo and behold, literally about 3.5 miles from where I live is a Gracie school, and it's not just any Gracie school. It's Nelson Montero's the professor there, and I mean he's one of the most experienced Gracie instructors in the world. And it was by fluke or fate or destiny. My daughter and his daughter became best friends in school. Didn't even know it, so she started coming over to the house. We're talking, and I ended up going there, and it's a mellow atmosphere, and there's no gunslingers going, oh, that's Tony. It's cool. So I've gotten to go in there, and between trips, put the gi on and put a white belt on after 3 decades of being a teacher. It was kind of cool. It was fun and humbling.
Cool. Well, that's really. I always respect people who. Everyone says, oh, yeah, martial arts is a lifelong journey of learning. But don't ever show me anything new. It's always neat when you can see people who are established teachers going outside their comfort zone, and deliberately going outside their comfort zone to seek out new experiences where they're not going to be the alpha male right away or the top dog in that new environment. So kudos to you, and I hope you enjoy the journey. I think we're running short of time, aren't we? You've got to run off to LA, and you've also got your camp. You've also got preparations for your camp. Why don't you talk a little bit about that? Why don't you tell us a little bit about how people can find out more about you and get in touch with you if they want to?
Sure, I appreciate that. Yeah, we've got every year we hold a camp, a different location. We've done some international, mostly in the States. This year we're in Vegas, in Henderson. I'm good friends with John Hackelman, and I think most of your listeners and readers should be familiar with John, of course, from the Pit. And
Chuck Liddell's coach. That's probably how most people would know of him.
Yeah. That's how I am. I'm like Jesse's wife, Jesse's husband. I'm not Tony Blauer. I'm known as somebody else's. But so John Hackelman, he's letting us use his new pit in Vegas, out in Henderson, so just off the Strip. We do this every year. We've done, Florida and West Point. We've done stuff, and we did Vegas a few years ago. And we usually have special guests. This year we have Tim Larkin, who's got a Navy background and has developed the target-focused training program, and he's going to come in and talk about. He's going to do 2 blocks on asocial behavior, which is a huge thing, especially for street self-defense, because a lot of times, we see something on the news and we're horrified, but that horror of watching where you're going, oh my God, I can't believe they did that to that person. Well, that's the same mindset that creates the hesitation in the victim. So he's going to do an interesting block on that, and then some of his stuff on his target system. And then, of course, my team and myself will be there all weekend, and Coach Glassman, founder of CrossFit, is coming in to talk about, a whole bunch of things. He's one of the best speakers. I'm always in awe of every speech, every time I've heard him talk. So he's coming in, and it's going to be cool. It's going to be, we love doing it. You get like a real cross section of whether it's Jiu-Jitsu, MMA, police officers, federal agents. My main audience, of course, is the professional security side, but we do have a growing number of self-defense proponents that study our personal defense readiness program and inject that in their schools. Because let's face it, the bottom line is, we all talk about it in the martial arts is, part of the byproduct of the training is self-defense. But if you're not teaching people the psychological, the fear management, the verbal, the awareness, how to weather the ambush, how to get to your fighting system in the fight, you're leaving them at a deficit. So we got a higher level education for that, and that's all happening next week in Vegas too. So back-to-back events.
So that's the first weekend in August 2011, is that correct?
Yeah, so the 3rd, 4th, the 4th, 5th, and 6th is our personal defense readiness instructor course, and then on the 6th and 7th, which should be Saturday, Sunday, at the Pit Las Vegas, at the Pit Vegas, is our camp. If anybody is it's really short notice, but if you're in the area, driving distance, or flying distance, Southwest has some crazy deals. You might want to try and jump on this, and I'd be more than willing to offer people that are your valued customers, some sort of late notice, the reverse of an early bird promotion. We can talk about that. But
tell them Stephan sent you.
Yeah.
Okay, and that would be TonyBlauer.com for more information.
Yeah, go to TonyBlauer.com, and our calendar's there. If you want to go right to our training calendar, it's pretty simple. It's BlauerSpear.com. But TonyBlauer.com, on the landing page, you'll see a calendar events. Click that; it'll take you right there, and then just scroll to the weekend and the month, and you'll have all the info.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, and have a fantastic weekend at the CrossFit Games, Tony.
Thank you. I really appreciate this, and it's been fun talking. I like getting my brain picked like this.
Okay. Take care then.